So listen, I just spent the last few months rereading hundreds of One Piece chapters in Japanese and sourcing and creating a library of video assets in 8-bit style, assets that I will probably never use again and will probably only be shown for split seconds to bring you this video. Now, was it a smart use of my time? Not really, but I had a butt ton of fun making it. So, sit down and have a cuppa while I talk One Piece with you and while you try not to blink so as to not miss a single detail. Let's go! The world of One Piece is full of characters with more depth than Fishman Island. For characters who happen to live in the panels of black and white pages, they are not flat. They have dimensional qualities and personalities that allow us to connect with them in ways we didn't even know we could with fictional characters. This, without a doubt, includes the animals in One Piece. Not only do animals hold the key to some of the richest mysteries in this world, the stories revolving around animals have been some of the most memorable for us fans. These characters truly hold a special place within our inner One Piece shrines. Now, a wee disclaimer, this video is going to be pretty loose with what is defined as an animal, since Oda himself is also incredibly loose regarding these kind of things anyway. Just look at all the diverse races we have in the world of One Piece. In Oda's eyes, they are all classified as people. And we should treat animals no differently, correct? If they have some sort of a soul and have animal-like qualities, they're going straight into Team Animal. So yes, we include our standard animals like the dogs, the birds, the pandas, the whales, and the cats. But also, all the hybrids, the chatties, the fruities, the dendens, the mechas, the Jurassics, the kaijus, the swim-swims, the mythicals, the big, the long, the imaginary, the strange, and yes, even the absolutely cursed. But let's also not forget the gun dogs, the bird horses, the horse birds, the animal humans, human animals, and even some of the human races with animal qualities. And yes, of course, this doesn't make sense strictly speaking, but thematically and in terms of what Oda is trying to convey, it totally fits. And if anything, you could even go so far as to say that humans to Oda are also animals. Minks, for example, call humans lesser minks, and the Zoan devil fruits actually have no Sarasara no Mi, the monkey fruit. Instead, we have the Hito no Mi, the human fruit. But the animals. These wacky and whimsical characters give even Pokemon a run for their money, which is a great segue to our video today, titled Joyboy Was a Pokemon Trainer. Hello there. My name is Kusoland. People affectionately refer to me as Crapland. Kuso means crap. I'm finally back with another One Piece theory video. Before we begin, if you've already watched my Giga theory titled I Broke One Piece, where I proved that One Piece is a Christmas story, then you are a Yonko level goat. Honestly, all the messages and support I received as a brand new content creator, really, you warmed my heart. I read each and every one of your messages with a great big Nika smile. Konnichiwa. And if this is your first time here, hajimemashite. Go ahead and gomu bazooka that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you won't regret it. Kusoland stocks will surely skyrocket to the moon. Okay, so it won't take a genius to know that this video is about Joyboy, but what do I mean by Joyboy was a Pokemon trainer? Well, it's quite simple really. I'm claiming that Joyboy was a pirate who lived during the Void Century and had 3 quote-unquote Pokemons. And by Pokemons, I'm talking about the animals in the world of One Piece. The 3 Pokemons/animals were a dog, a monkey, and a bird, who went on to become the founding figures of the Marshall D, the Monkey D, and the Rocks D families. Outrageous claim, I know, but not a delusional headcanon, I can assure you. But since I'm going to be talking about these 3 Pokemons a lot in this video, I'm going to just refer to them as DMB, or Dumb for short, from now on. So to prove my theory, I need to explain number 1, why Joyboy would have been a pirate with animals. Number 2, why 3 animals instead of just 1? And number 3, why were the animals dumb? And I will explain the Kuso out of those points. But I'm also going to give you the Kusoland certified cherry on top by predicting the characteristics of each of these creatures, where Oda got his inspiration from, and I'll even take a crack at their names. But hey, if this video is meant to be about Joyboy and his animals, why did I spend the first few minutes casting such a wide net by talking about all the animals in One Piece? Well, in my opinion, it's important to realize how intrinsically tied animal themes are to the story. After all, animals are directly tied to the key theme of this grand adventure. You see, there are many people or groups of people with animal themes. Kuma, koala, Leo, fisher tiger, boa, and actually, come to think of it, aren't the admirals and even the Shichibukai animals also? And CP9 too? The jailer beasts of Impel Down? But what is the common thread? What is the rope that ties them all together? Well, it's freedom. Or rather, it's the lack of freedom. Perhaps we will eventually find out that even the Gorosei lack freedom in some way or another. So, Kuma, Koala, Leo's Tontara tribe, Fisher Tiger, and Boa, all of them were former slaves. The admirals, the Shichibukai, and the CP9 are all essentially owned by the world government. Why do you think there are so many marines with dog-related names? They're literally dogs of the world government, made to follow their orders blindly. Ironic of course because of Mr. Old Man Purple Tiger over here. In the world of One Piece, animals are creatures to be tamed, controlled, and conquered. Animals, including the hairless monkeys known as humans, lack freedom. This is why Luffy the Sun God will liberate the world and bring freedom to all, just as Joyboy most likely tried to do all those years ago. I believe that Joyboy was a pirate, and not just any pirate, the most piratey pirate of the Four Seas. In my lineup of Joyboy and his crew, I depict Joyboy with an eye patch. Remember when Oda told us that he wasn't so keen on designing characters with eye patches? And this was because he wanted to avoid this typical pirate trope. He goes on to state that despite this, there will indeed be a pirate with an eye patch in the near future, and that he just cannot wait to draw this character. Well, I believe that Oda is saving the eye patch trope for none other than our joyous boy, the protagonist of the Void Century. However, Oda will also incorporate another pirate trope into Joyboy. And no, I'm not talking about peg legs or hook hands, rum drinking or shanty singing, gold teeth or bad teeth, or even scurvy. I'm talking about the pirate trope of animals aboard their ships. I predict that animals accompanied Joyboy on his various adventures and voyages. The imagery tying pet companions to pirates was popularized by Long John Silver's in Treasure Island. Nowadays, parrots and monkeys are commonly interwoven with pirates and would be considered a typical pirate trope. Historically, the most common animals aboard a pirate ship, both fictional and or historical, were parrots, monkeys, cats, dogs, goats, snakes, and small rodents like rats. But my pick, as you know by now, is the dumb trio, bird, dog, and monkey. To explain why Joyboy will have the dumb Pokemons, we need to think like Oda for a moment. Look, I'm sure that you know that Oda loves to weave different folktales, mythologies, legends, and even historical events into the story. If you're a fan of Oda's style of storytelling, you will also know that he loves to create and reiterate intricate parallels and opposites throughout the story. So what's the well-known story that the Japanese author will have chosen to combine with these piratey animals? The answer is Momotaro, the quintessential fable from Japan that's been referenced plenty of times in One Piece already. After all, the three animal companions who ended up joining Momotaro were indeed the dog, the monkey, and the bird. If you don't know the story of Momotaro, here's a speedy synopsis.
Momotaro, or Peach Boy, is a folktale about a boy born from a giant peach who grows up to become a hero. Momotaro sets out on a quest to defeat a group of Oni demons terrorizing the land. Along the way, he meets talking animals who he befriends by feeding them kibidango, sweet millet dumplings. The companions were a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant. With their help, Momotaro successfully defeats the Oni on the island of Onigashima and brings peace to the region.
And if you're wondering whether this video is going to get into the nitty-gritty of the Momotaro candidates in the story, no it's not. As I mentioned already, the dumb pattern has been used in the story numerous times already, the most obvious examples of which are the three original admirals, Akainu, Kizaru, and Aokiji, whose translations are the red dog, the yellow monkey, and the blue pheasant. Another example is in the Wano arc, where we also have the Onigashima, occupied by the Oni, just like in the original Momotaro. We even get the kibidango, which Tama feeds to tame animals and Zoan uses. The community also astutely pointed out that the three mythical Zoans who were present at Onigashima were the dumb trio, Inu no Mi, Hito Hito no Mi, and Tori Tori no Mi. But here's something that no one seems to be talking about. The dumb pattern goes much deeper than that. So, in Wano, right, Luffy washes up on a beach and is awoken by a crab who claws him on the nose. which, because a crab when written in hiragana is ka ni. When you reverse the characters, it becomes nika. Then, wouldn't you know it, Luffy the sun god meets the dog and then the monkey very shortly after. Finally, he meets Kozaki Sukiyaki, who is dressed as none other than a tengu, which is a Japanese bird demon. So Luffy meets the dumb trio in the exact same order as in the original story of Momotaro. Curious if there's more examples of the dumb pattern? Oh, there is a kusotan more, but you'll have to stick around to find out. Finally, I don't think that these three companions would have been your off-the-shelf basic B vanilla creatures. As I explained in the first few minutes, the world of One Piece is full of the wonderful, wacky, and the straight up insane. There's no way Oda gonna do you like that. So here is the prediction. I believe that during the Void Century, a great war took place. The war was so epic that the stories became legendary, and the key players, both people and animals, came to be seen as heroes, devils, and literal gods. I believe that Joyboy's companions were also of such legendary status. The bird was the king of the rocks. The dog was the mythical guardian dog Cerberus. The monkey was a legendary monkey king like Hanuman and Sun Wukong. This should also come as no surprise, since the main religion in Japan is Shinto, meaning path of the gods. In Shinto, gods commonly take on the form of an animal. Even in other religions, we have animal gods like the Anubis, Horus, Bastet, Ganesha, and the Quetzalcoatl. So, it's bound to happen. We will see it in the Void Century. Characters with godly and legendary titles, since that seems to be the direction that we're currently heading in. I'm going to get into talking about each of those dumb Pokemon soon, but first of all, let me teach you the importance of the number 3 in the world of One Piece. Question: why do we need Joyboy to have 3 Pokemons and not just 1? Alright, let me explain. That's just not how Oda works. We're talking about the man whose sole reason for giving Zoro the 3-sword style was because the most legendary samurai known in Japan, Musashi Miyamoto, was a swordman of the 2-sword style. The man always has to 1-up or 2-up others. So let me ask you this, you think Oda would be satisfied with Joyboy just having 1 Pokemon? Nah. But why 3? Why will Professor Oda, the mastermind and creator of One Piece, choose to give Joyboy 3 Pokemons? Why not 2, 4, or a complete Pokedex of them? 3 brothers, 3 ancient weapons, 3 devil fruit types, the 3 great powers, Oars the third, the 3 admirals, the 3 gates of the Tarai Current, the 3-eye tribe. The number 3 is sacred in the world of One Piece. Is it because Oda is a writer who follows the rule of 3, a key writing principle, a nod to Christianity and the Holy Trinity perhaps? Or maybe it ties to the 3 godly siblings, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, or Amaterasu, Tsukiyomi, and Susanoo, or maybe the 3 main gods of Hinduism, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. The answer is often quite simple. It's because Oda is an absolute pun fiend, a pun addict of the greatest proportions who really can't help himself but fart out puns whenever he gets the chance. So the reason why the number 3 is so important in the world of One Piece is because 3 in Japanese is sun, which sounds like the sun. That's all, folks. It's as simple as that. When we look at the Straw Hats, we see that Oda incorporates the sun symbol into the crew in obvious ways, such as with the sun hat, sun god Nika, Nami and her sunflower motif, Chopper's hat, Robin as Miss All Sunday, Brooks' epithet the Soul King, a pun on Soul King, soul meaning sun, Jinbei and the Sun Pirates, and his epithet in English of the first son of the sea. And of course, let's not forget the 1000th Sunny. But when we take into account the wordplay with the number 3, we also get Santo Ryu, the 3-sword style, Sun Ji, the 3rd Vinsmoke Sun. Nami's name is Na-Mi, and her favorite food is the mandarin, which is mikan in Japanese, and Mi is another reading for the kanji for 3. Frankie himself being Battle Frankie 37, Luffy's first ever bounty of 30 million, his 3rd bounty of 300 million, which might I add was attained after defeating Rob Lucci, a man whose name literally means to rob the light, and this feat was on Enies Lobby, an island that is always daytime. Usopp also acquires his first ever bounty post Enies Lobby of 30 million, the exact same amount as Luffy's first bounty. Fitting of course, since Usopp is a parallel to Luffy and Nika, and because the Mask of Sogeking is a star, which is significant because, fun fact, a sun is also a star. Yeah, mind-blowing. And finally, Luffy's 7th bounty, post Wano arc, when he acquires Gear 5, the Sun God Nika form, is, drumroll please, pun intended, 3 billion. And while we're on bounties, Bonnie's latest bounty is 320 million, 32 in Goro Aose being Sa Ni, as in sunny. Goro Aose, by the way, is a Japanese wordplay if you didn't know. But yeah, you don't have to remind me that Bonnie's stocks are pretty low right now. I get it. It's looking less and less likely that she will join the Straw Hats, but listen. She is also from Sorbet Kingdom, which in Japanese is Sorbe, again Soru or Sol, meaning the sun. And what do you know? Sunflowers. Even her birthday of September 1st, which in numericals is 9-1, when flipped upside down reads as 1-6, the Goro Aose for Emu. Bonnie is the opposite of Emu, so give her a chance, will ya? Now where was I? Okay. So, did you know that even Luffy's fire and lightning elemental powers are tied to the sun? With the fire element, I'm not even going to dignify that with a reason, but as for lightning, the way you say thunder if it was Japified would be sunder with an S instead, since TH isn't really in the wheelhouse for Japanese people, like even I'm struggling right now. So it makes sense why in Amazon Lily, Luffy with his ties to snakes faced the 3 Gorgon sisters. There's that number again. The first 2 sisters that Luffy faced were Boa Marigold and Boa Sandersonia. Marigold, gold being the color associated with the sun, and she had the fire-based attacks. As for Sandersonia, it's likely her name is a play on Thunder Sonia, so thunder, lightning, and electricity also connects to the sun in One Piece. The sun is the single most important symbol in the world of One Piece, and the number 3, or sun, is the Goro Aose for it. So it's of no mystery why this pirate adventure is full of this number. Now, shall we continue with some monkey business? Let's begin identifying the monkey Pokemon. We'll start with a warm-up. In terms of the obvious monkey Pokemons already introduced into the story, we have Luffy, Kizaru, the members of the Saruyama Alliance, Bariete, Monji, Blackback, and the other monkey mix, Hihimaru, Humandrels, Blue Gorillas or Urugori, Sengoku, and Commander-in-Chief Kong, who share the same birthday of May 9th, the Goro Aose, for which is Goku, Sengoku's gorilla pet Uhokun, other minor characters like the Gorilla Smile users, the Sea Monkeys, the Coffee Monkey Gang, and Captain Gorilla, and even some piratey monkeys like Dorma's Monkey and Monster who rides on Bonk Punch's shoulders. But if you're an absolute legend and you've seen my Christmas theory video, then you'll know that I cracked the case on the identity of BINK'S' sake. If you haven't had a chance to watch the absolute banger yet, or you've just straight up forgotten everything I've told you, well then, I'll give you a quick summary. Oda often designs characters based on famous characters, actors, and celebrities. Michael Jackson, Eminem, Hulk Hogan, Al Capone, Dr. Frankenfurter, Jim Carrey, Daft Punk, Yusaku Matsuda, Unta Sugawara, Kunie Tanaka, and I happened to stumble upon the actor that BINK'S was based on. In the 90s film Ace Ventura Pet Detective featuring Jim Carrey, Ace had a sidekick who was played by a famous actor by the name of BINK'S. BINK'S the monkey. Yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing Oda would pull, and you know it. Anyway, this led me down a rabbit hole and resulted in finding out exactly who BINK'S was. BINK'S full name was Monkey D. BINK'S. He was a monkey mink who brewed saruzake, a type of fruit wine which, you guessed it, would go on to become BINK'S sake. BINK'S was the king of the minks, a literal monkey king befitting the epithet of Sun Wukong. And by the way, if you were like, what the heck is saruzake? It's the drink that Monji was serving to Zoro on Zou. It's 100% canon. Like, I know that it all sounds completely out of whack, but I did my research and I low-key figured out who BINK'S was. So, the reason that Luffy transforms on a full moon is not just an homage to Akira Toriyama and the Saiyan race. You know, carrot, Kakarot. It is also because Luffy's lineage goes all the way back to mink lineage, the same race of people who are also able to go into their white Super Saiyan mode, the Sulong, on a full moon. We see further proof of this when we look at the literal kanji form of the name Sulong. It is Tsukino Shishi, meaning the Shishi lions of the moon. Did you hear anything familiar? Shishi, shi. That's quite literally Luffy's laugh. So, the question as to who the monkey to Joyboy was is crystal clear now. A legendary Pokemon, a godly monkey king whose name inspired the beloved One Piece shanty, BINK'S sake, and was even the ancestor to the future Pirate King. Surely a Pokemon of that caliber is more than fitting to have been a companion of Joyboy. Hell yeah, it's on like Donkey Kong. What's that? What type of Pokemon was BINK'S? Electric, of course. If it's not clear to you why BINK'S is an electric type Pokemon, it's because of Electro, the electric ability of the Minx. Luffy is also able to use a similar but more sophisticated version of this. Even Nami, another monkey Pokemon, is an electric type. What? Nami is more of a cat Pokemon? Listen here, don't you know that characters in the world of One Piece can be associated with more than one animal? Nami has close ties to cats as she has the epithet of cat burglar and had the I am lion One Piece in this case referring to an item of clothes rather than the show. But while it's true that she's feline in nature, she also has ties to Sun Wukong. Like the mythical monkey, Nami along with Luffy also had shapeshifting abilities. They're both tied to a flying nimbus and have a weapon that stretches and contracts. No, get your mind out of the gutter. You could even go on to say that Luffy ate the Nika fruit and Nami's favorite food is the mandarin, a nod to Hanuman who accidentally ate the sun. If you think back to the Zou arc, you'll now notice that Nami had a strangely deep connection to the mink, to the point where she was even gifted a dress that was Zou's national treasure. Sanji even mistook her for a goddess in this attire. Could it be that Nami was actually a princess of Zou? This is also incredibly fitting, since in Hinduism, Indra, the god of thunder, lightning, storms, rain and war, also had an elephant companion. Now time to check the Pokédex entry for Monkey D. BINK'S. But anyways, monkeys in the world of One Piece may sometimes have ties to being electric types. Probably wise to keep an eye out for this pattern in future arcs. There are far too many dog Pokemons in One Piece to go through them all, but the top dogs on everyone's list I'm sure are Boodle the Poodle, Dole the Dole, and the Wonder Dog Wanda. What? I've forgotten the most important dog? Oh right, how could I forget? You mean Shushu, right? As mentioned earlier, Oda likes to mix and match different stories together and take inspiration from them. My hypothesis for which dog-centric stories Oda pulled from are the following. The story of Hachiko the dog, the three-headed Cerberus, and the Black Dog mythology. Let's cut to the chase. Joyboy's legendary dog Pokemon was a Cerberus. I think that Blackbeard is also a Cerberus of some kind, whether through his lineage or through a devil fruit or something to do with a soul transfer of some kind. Either way, I think that Blackbeard's past will parallel that of the Cerberus who lived during Joyboy's time. Now listen, before you start frantically typing away at the comments below, I am well aware that sections of this idea are not new. Like, I know there are plenty of videos out there talking about how Blackbeard is a Cerberus. But if you've seen my Christmas theory video, you'll know that I have a unique perspective on things, and this theory will be no different. Let me cook, fellas. Now where was I? Right, so, dogs and more specifically, Joyboy's Cerberus. Let's start with why I think Oda will incorporate the Hachiko story into Cerberus. In case you don't know, Hachi was a dog who faithfully waited for the return of his beloved owner, although his owner would never return since he had passed away. Hachi waited for more than 9 years until his passing. Bro was truly loyal to the bone. And he was given the suffix of Ko, which is a title given to ancient Chinese dukes. They even erected a statue of him at the Shibuya station, which you probably already know about. But I'm sure the story actually sounds familiar to you, since that's basically the story of Shushu, and Laboon with the Rumbar Pirates, and Sherry with Tonjit, and even the Duke Inuarashi with Odin, and Onimaru with the blue-haired Manimo. And if we're just talking about animals who outlived their guardians, there's actually a bunch more cases. Then there's Marshall D. Teach, aka Blackbeard. This vignette of Blackbeard as a child is what caught my attention. A child, alone, crying under a crescent moon. Tell me that doesn't remind you of Hachiko. The whole thing with dogs and wolves howling at the moon is a well-known trope, but characters associated with dogs in One Piece also connect to the moon. Zoro, whose name means fox in Spanish, and is a Shimotsuki descendant, Shimotsuki meaning frost moon. Katarina Devon, who is also a fox, has the epithet of Crescent Moon Hunter. And what was that? foxes aren't dogs. That's fair, but Katarina's devil fruit is the dog fruit, so take it up with Oda. The minks become sulongs under the full moon. As I mentioned earlier, sulongs translated to shishi lions of the moon. Shishi are also called komainu, which means lion dogs, but I'm sure that just pointing out the moon in this vignette is not nearly enough to convince you that Blackbeard is linked to Hachiko, am I right? The Hachi in Hachiko can mean 8. Remember Hachi, the octopus fishman with his 8 limbs? Then suddenly, you remember Blackbeard's Jolly Roger with the 8-sided bones. And we cannot deny that dogs and bones are a match made in heaven. But perhaps you're well informed and know that the 8 bones and the 3 skulls read as 8-3, the goroaose for which is Yami, and no duh, that's the name of Blackbeard's devil fruit. We also see that his age pre-time skip is 38, and his birthday of August the 3rd is of course 8-3. So 8 and 3 corresponds to Yami, not to be confused with Yummy. But is that all? Quick side note here. Although Blackbeard's 8-3 can refer to Yami, as in darkness, 8 and 3 can also refer to the sun. Hachi the octopus is shown to have associations with the sun, and the 8-sided wheel and the symbol with the 8 smaller circles orbiting it has been used to depict the sun throughout the story. So, although Blackbeard's 8-3 can refer to the darkness, these same numbers can be used to represent the sun. Alright, back to 8-3 in Blackbeard, meaning Yami. It has no relevance to Hachiko, right? Well, I'll have you know that Hachiko the dog passed away on March 8th, 3-8. So Blackbeard was born on 8-3 and Hachi passed away on 3-8. And Blackbeard's current base is Fulaled. The Japanese name for this location is Hachinosu, which means beehive. The Hawkeye out there must have noticed the Hachi in the name, right? In this case, the Hachi is referring to the word for bees, but Hachinosu can also translate to the home of Hachi. Also, I noticed while creating assets for this video that the zombie Cerberus has a zombie number of 82, the goroaose for which is Ha and Ni, honey. So, there's another Cerberus that links to Hachinosu. Hachinosu is the former base of Rocksteady Zebek and his crew, and Blackbeard's ship is the Saber of Zebek. Could Zebek be the person that Blackbeard is waiting for? Is that too wild of a thought for you? But listen, the word for dog in Japanese is inu. Well, another reading for the kanji for inu is ken. When ken is written with another kanji, ken can also mean sword. So, dog equals ken, which equals sword. You see where I'm going with this? A saber is a type of sword, so the Saber of Zebek is the dog of Zebek. And if you manage to follow everything I just said without having a stroke, treat yourself by hitting that like button. Now, am I saying that Blackbeard was the dog of Zebek, much like Onimaru was to Ushimaru? Well, that would probably make no sense, since Rox potentially died during the God Valley incident 38 years ago. Blackbeard would have only been 2 at the time. Although I guess in dog years, that would probably put him at 23 years old. But no, my headcanon is that Zebek had a dog, but it wasn't Blackbeard. The dog was Ochoku, and Blackbeard was Zebek's son. So, the Rocky Port incident was a battle between Kobe the Momotaro and the 3 dogs Ochoku, Law, and Blackbeard. But, don't make me explain this headcanon since it's a video for another time. I suppose I actually made a ridiculous comment somewhere in there. I mean, come on, Law is a dog? Well, of course he is. He's straight up a husky. But no, seriously, Blackbeard is the son of Zebek. Now that actually makes a lot of sense. Let me explain. Ace is also a dog. His epithet of Fire Fist in Japanese is Hiken, which can also sound like Fire Dog. Ken meaning dog, as previously mentioned. And actually, we have seen Ace being linked to dogs visually here and there in the franchise. So, we have a dog of shadows and a dog of fire. But Blackbeard is the son of Zebek because Ace is the son of Roger. Ace and Blackbeard, A and B, are 2 sides of the same coin. They are light and shadow. Both were introduced in Drum Island. Both are the sons of Whitebeard. Both like to bling it out with pearl necklaces. Oh, which reminds me, looky here. Is that Blackbeard or what? And anyway, one shared his devil fruit with someone, while the other unalived him for it. Ace was born roughly 2 years after Roger's passing, while Blackbeard was born 2 years before Zebek's supposed passing. Roger's sword is named Ace, while Blackbeard's ship is named Saber of Zebek. Ace detested Roger, while Blackbeard seems to follow in Zebek's footsteps. But I digress. Hachiko and Blackbeard. You see it now too, right? And we'll see it again with Joyboy's Cerberus, since that's just what Oda does. He repeats events in different ways to build upon the same idea. Right, why Cerberus? Cerberus was the three-headed dog in Greek mythology, owned by Hades, the god of the underworld. Cerberus had the job of guarding the gates of the underworld to prevent the souls from leaving. We've seen Cerberus a bunch of times already. In Usopp's flashback, where he's chasing a dog he calls Cerberus, and the closest thing we've had so far to an actual dog of the legend is the three-headed dog-fox zombie in Thriller Bark who Luffy tamed, also called Cerberus. There are also 3 references to Cerberus in the Enies Lobby arc. For one, the Chief Justices of Enies Lobby, the three-headed Baskerville, and they are a reference to Arthur Conan Doyle's novel The Hound of Baskervilles, which in turn is also a reference to the famous Black Dogs, something I'll talk about a little later. The Hornobankenbutai, or the Courthouse Guard Dog units in English, are another example of Cerberus, since they are guard dogs who defend Enies Lobby. Finally, we also have Zoro, another dog character using Ashura, the three-headed deity, for the first time. Cerberus, Sun Wukong, dragons, centaurs, Phoenix, Hubie, Thor, Buddha, Zeus, Prometheus, Poseidon, Pluton, and Uranus. Gods, devils, and creatures of legends from our world mentioned in the world of One Piece. The Gorosei and their recently revealed epithets. The way the story is headed, these godly figures may have been historical figures in the world of One Piece. Have you noticed, by the way, that Blackbeard, Ace, and Zoro have a weird thing about sleeping? Zoro mostly just drinks, trains, fights, gets lost, and above all, sleeps, like always. If he's not doing one of those other things, he's probably sleeping. Ace too, he's always falling asleep mid-sentence or mid-eating. Then there's Blackbeard, who never sleeps, like never. Interestingly, Luffy on Drum Island makes that famous remark about people from snow countries never sleeping. It's interesting because dogs in One Piece are often tied to the cold. Zoro of the Shimotsuki family meaning Frost Moon, and Onimaru, Yamato with his ice abilities. The wolves of Impel Down who happen to be on the freezing hell level of all places. Even Blackbeard and his first bounty of literally 0 berries, which, might I add, is absolutely bizarre. It's not that he had no bounty, his bounty was actually 0 berries. But it actually makes a lot of sense when you remember that water freezes at 0 degrees. And yeah, of course, the 0 could be connected to other things like 0 in Japanese being there, which can also mean soul or spirit. And maybe it means that Blackbeard is possessed by some kind of spirit. Or maybe 0 is an homage to the ghostly pet dog owned by Jack Skellington, since we all know that Oda absolutely loves Nightmare Before Christmas. But the main reason why dogs being tied to the cold is interesting is because of Brook and his Yomi Yomi no Mi abilities. He states that his chilling abilities come from the Yomi, the underworld. So the most logical speculation is that the land of the dead, whose gates would be guarded by Cerberus, would be chillingly cold. But where was I? Crap on a stick, I keep going on random tangents. Alright, let me know if I'm doing it again. But yeah, sleep. Why is it important to the theme of Cerberus, guard dog of the underworld? Because Oimo and Kashi, who guarded the front gates of Enies Lobby, were asleep just before they stopped the Frankie family from entering. Because gate guards being asleep on the job is a common motif in film and literature. Cerberus was no different. In the stories, the musician Orpheus overcame Cerberus by lulling him to sleep using music. Yes, like in Harry Potter. Clever you. Here's the headcanon. Like Zunisha, who was cursed to walk and walk, carrying the mink race on his back, the founding Marshal D member, Cerberus, was cursed to never sleep, because he was asleep on the job and let someone or something through the gates. Blackbeard, being a Marshal D descendant, is also cursed to never sleep. Maybe he's got beef with, gates because of it? Jokes aside, this vignette makes you feel bad for him in some sort of way, Yeah, never mind. Just as an FYI, when I say these characters may have been cursed, since Oda likes to weave science and logic into the magical and mythical elements of the story, the curse may be more in the form of like an authority chip type of thing. As in, Zunisha and Cerberus were commanded by someone with authority to forever walk or never sleep. Damn. Okay, so I promised to talk about the black dog also, eh? Honestly, the dog section is too long already, but basically, The black dog is a well-known hellhound in English folklore, connected with the devil and is an omen of death. They're associated with crossroads, places of executions, and ancient pathways. They're meant to be massive and with like red glowing eyes. In literature, Arthur Conan Doyle's The Hound of Baskervilles makes references to the black dog as mentioned earlier. There's also the Black Dog of Newgate, a legend revolving around the prisoners of Newgate Prison claiming that the spirit of a murdered warlock was going around the prison in the form of a monstrous black dog and taking revenge on those who wronged him. I'll let you connect your own dots about this, but that is pretty juicy, right? Back to Cerberus. It actually makes sense as to why Blackbeard is able to take in multiple devil fruits. The two other instances of three-headed creatures in One Piece show them to have three different souls. Although, it's crucial to point out that the soul in One Piece is housed in the heart and not in the head, since we see proof of this with Law's ability to switch souls. So perhaps Cerberus will have three heads but also three hearts. And the final reason why Blackbeard will tie into Cerberus, the answer is teeth. Yeah. Bro's got messed up teeth. It falls out and grows back in different places throughout the story, right? There's a lot of emphasis on them, but you get it, right? Oh, you don't get it? The answer is teeth. Let me say it again, in Japanese. The answer is hadesu. Ha in Japanese is teeth, so hadesu translates to its teeth. Now you get it, right? Hadesu, Hades, Hades, Hades. That's right, Oda is telling us that the answer is Hades. Remember when I told you that Cerberus was a dog of Hades? So that's my guess. Joyboy's legendary dog Pokemon was a Cerberus. Although there are many other dogs in other mythologies who also guarded the underworld or hell, my bet is on Cerberus. And I'm thinking that Oda will sprinkle some Hachiko and Black Dog references in his story also. The three dogs' names were perhaps Marshall D, Keru, Battle, and Losu. Now, before we go on to the next section about the bird Pokemon to Joyboy, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about hell quickly. I've mentioned that Cerberus and Hades resided in the underworld, a general place for the dead in Greek myth. Well, the underworld, which Hades presided over, also included Tartarus, the Greek equivalent of hell. I suppose Zoro wanting to be the king of hell actually makes a lot of sense in this line of thought, since as we mentioned, Zoro is 100% a dog Pokemon. Hades, the ruler of the underworld, whose companion was a dog. Hades, whose Roman equivalent is Pluto. But where the hell is hell in the world of One Piece? Well, in Greek mythology, Tartarus is as far below the earth as heaven is above the earth. Sounds familiar? Skypia with its Heaven's Gate was 10,000 meters above, and Fishman Island was 10,000 meters below sea level. So, Fishman Island is hell, since it's the deepest dwelling that we know of? But, as Sabo pointed out in Merijua upon seeing the yokai forms of the Gorosei, it seems as though hell was in fact up above and not below. Many of the folks in the theory community upon reading Roger's iconic line have guessed that the world may literally need to be flipped upside down by the end of the story, but perhaps it is not upside down, perhaps it is right side up. By flipping the world upside down by the end of the story, we are actually reverting the world back up to the way it was meant to be. A cyclic motion like a wheel or a clock or a swirl, which will revert hell back to the bottom and heaven to the top. But then again, this is a pirate story, and this world is generally imagined and visualized in a way appropriate to their era, as a map, on paper, on a flat piece of paper. There is no z-axis on a 2D map. There is no 10,000 meters above or below sea level, and so the appropriate way that one would describe what is above or below in this case is of course north as above and south as below. So in the world of One Piece, flipping the world upside down would look like this. Shanks and Buggy argue over which is colder, the North Pole or the South Pole. A wise man once sang, "The islands in the south are warm, the heads so hot, a bunch of idiots. The islands in the north are chilly, the heads so cold, a bunch of idiots." During the Void Century, perhaps the South Pole was hell and the North Pole was heaven. Then the world of One Piece was flipped upside down. Heaven and hell was switched. Gods came to be known as devils. After all, what do we have inside devil fruits? Literal powers of gods. And devils became the gods. If all this talk about gods and devils fascinate you, I suggest you go check out Star Knight and Alexa's video as well as Straw Hat Lucas's video. Both have incredible takes and boy are they entertaining. And I must say, who was the artiste who created their thumbnails? Like, damn, they must have been super talented. It was me, I made them. But seriously, do watch both of those videos and give them my love. And so, the world was flipped upside down. We have indication of this in the chapter cover of the South Bird alongside the other compass birds, North, West and East. Unlike a Zoro who is constantly getting lost, the South Bird always faces south. We know that this bird facing the opposite direction is the North Bird. Logic dictates that the West Bird must be this one, and the East Bird must be this one, and yet, hang on a second, the bird with the W on its crown is eastward, while the bird with the E on its head is facing westward. Unless you believe that Oda the Goda made a great blunder like Lily did, we can take this as a clue that the world of One Piece was indeed flipped at one point. So this would mean that our buddy or pal, the South Bird, was actually originally the North Bird. As told to us, South Birds were used in ancient times for navigation purposes. It makes total sense because a compass in our world also always points north. So perhaps it was Joyboy and his people that used these fellas to navigate to the North Pole. If you know, you know. So, what was the point of derailing the video and what was I trying to get at? Well, now we have a hypothesis about the location of Heaven and Hell and how it was flipped at some point in the history. Makes sense as to why Zoro, the King of Hell, is always going off in the opposite direction, huh? But at this point in this video, the way I'm going off on random tangents like constantly, I don't think I'm any better than Moneyball. And you know, they say it's about the journey, not the destination, but was it worth our time? I don't know. Let's just move on to the next section and talk about birds some more. We have now made friends / captured 2 out of the 3 legendary Pokemons. The third and final Pokemon of the dumb pattern is the bird, the legendary rock, and more specifically, he will be the king of the Musketedomo Goryu birds, the same species of birds that Chopper befriended during the 2-year training arc. Let's face it fellas, these birds are just a big bird and a parrot mashed together in a blender, but I believe it's Oda's interpretation of the mythical bird rock, which is similar to the Garuda and the Phoenix. Say what? These birds aren't majestic enough for you? I mean, the design's not even that far off from the poster boy of Pokemon Gold, Ho-Oh. There's also Balloon the Rock, the last of his kind who was introduced in the second version of Romance Dawn, the pilot to One Piece. This is how the mythical rock looks like when Oda draws them. So tell me, does Balloon look mythical or majestic? Well, you know what? Maybe he kinda does. Those eyes are so... We've had plenty of examples of the rock, Garuda and the Phoenix in the story already. The Musketedomo Goryu birds of Torino Kingdom are, as I mentioned, rock-like birds, and curiously enough, in the mobile game One Piece Treasure Cruise, they are titled the Birdie Kingdom Rocks. Then there's Vinsmoke Judge's epithet of Garuda, Vivi and Luffy who rode on Pal in Alabasta mirroring Vishnu the Supreme God riding the Garuda. Of course we shan't forget Rox D. Zebek, whose nose and hair in this silhouette in my humble opinion reminded me of a a parrot. And Rox? That's a little on the nose there, don't you think? There's also Fuzo, the pet of Shuro, who can breathe fire, and who could forget Pineapple Head? Most importantly, Luffy also connects to the rock with his red rock attack. You don't think that will come up later in the story? I mean, Luffy also did the Gomu Gomu no Bajran gun attack, literally meaning the monkey god gun, and has also tamed a creature called Cerberus. Now let me go on a final mega tangent. I promise it's the last one. Maybe. The reason why the dumb pattern is interesting is because we can predict the final showdown for the end of One Piece. We have Luffy the monkey and Blackbeard the dog, which leaves the bird. It's Emu. Emu is an emu. Let me explain. Here's a hot tip. A good place to look for clues for a theory is in the chapter covers. So let's scour each and every chapter cover starting all the way from chapter 1 to check if we can find clues about Emu being an emu. Chapter 1. Okay, well I guess there's a bird with a crown on his head that's been cleverly cropped by Oda. Well, could be something. Let's put it in the back pocket for now. Chapter 2, let's go. Oh, right. Well, that was easy. And those stripes on the bird reminds me. Emu's eyes. Surely, if Emu is a bird Pokemon, then we'll see other bird Pokemons with these eyes, right? Well, there's this Sea King for starters. And even Robin, when she's feeling a little bit stabby. Even Vivi with her hypnosis has the same ringed effect. The same ringed effect that Oda uses for showing sound waves. Birds. They tweet, cheep, chirp, and shriek, hoot, caw, and caw. Birds and sounds. Do you see the vision? But the whole ring dye Sharingan thing is very interesting, and Tainted Mouth actually goes deep into this in his mega theory link below, so do check it out. It's an incredible video. You're welcome. Now we also get the people living in Torino Kingdom with eyes tattooed on them. So Emu's ring dyes will likely tie into sound and hypnosis, and maybe a trait linking some bird-related characters. Do we have any other potential clues tying Emu to birds? Well, they live atop a massive wall above most of humanity and all the other celestial dragons. They're also likely considered a celestial dragon themselves. They like to hang with flowers and butterflies, and also have strange body proportions. Like, I don't want to be rude here, but their shoulders are down here, and top of their head is up there? That's weird, bro. And finally, they have a super tall crown. All those traits are bird-like, no? So let me explain a couple of those points for you so we're on the same page. Emu is a celestial dragon, and is therefore tied to a bird. Let's use Shanks as an example. Shanks has a sword named Griffin. A griffin is part lion, part eagle. His rival is Mihawk the hawk. Fitting then that Mihawk's rival is another bird, since characters with the same animal traits will often clash. Shanks is also tied to dragons, as you can see from his ship's figurehead, and the reveal that he has celestial dragon lineage, so dragons are linked to birds. Well, dragons, no duh, are flying creatures like birds, but there's a deeper reason than that. Oda's greatest idol is Akira Toriyama, the author of Dragon Ball. Toriyama is written as Tori, meaning bird, and Yama, meaning mountain. In Color Walk Volume 1, in an interview between Toriyama and Oda, Oda even goes on to claim that Toriyama is a godlike figure to him who lives in a different dimension. So you see, to Oda, dragon, god, and bird are inseparable. It also makes sense that the celestial dragons, who were bird characters, also took the red line from the Lunarians, who were a race of winged people able to use flames, an elemental ability commonly used by bird Pokemons in One Piece. And the thing about butterflies? As I already hinted in the title of this section, bird in Japanese is tori, but another reading for this kanji is cho. For example, a sancho, literally meaning three birds, are birds like pheasants, chickens, and geese. But cho when written as a different kanji is, you guessed it, butterfly. So, Robin is a bird, Sanji is a bird, Sora, meaning sky, is a bird, Reiju is a bird, and even Linearia, one of Shanks' subordinate crews, who was recently revealed as a captain of the Night Butterfly Pirates, is also a bird, since a Linearia is also a type of bird. Emu is a bird. It's also fitting since butterflies in Greek mythology symbolize the souls of the dead. Again, a link to the underworld, am I right? Finally, the tall crown. Like, no doubt, it relates to the Baphomet, right? As I suggested in my Christmas theory video, Emu will likely link to a goat, but I also believe that they will link into a bird also. But let's think about all the other characters who also have long heads or long headwear to see if they also connect to birds. Well, Zeph for sure. He was the true father figure to Sanji, a bird Pokemon, but also has this Jolly Roger here. And there's also Vice Admiral Strawberry, Chinjiao, Fukurokuju, and Vegapunk, all of whom are also well, I guess not really. No, look, it would be a stretch to say that these characters connect to birds. I could come up with some bullkussel reason for how they connect, but Kusoland ain't gonna do you like that. So, point number 1, likes to perch on high places. Check. Point number 2, Emu is likely a celestial dragon and therefore is a bird. Check. Point number 3, Emu has weird proportions. Check, checkity check. Point number 4, tied to butterflies, which ties to birds. Check. And point number 5, has a super tall crown. Half a check, so cheh. Alright, tangent over. You get it now. The dumb pattern is super interesting. But the question at hand was meant to be, why the rock and why the Musketedomo Goyu bird as Joyboy's Pokemon? You know how I said that Oda is an absolute pun fiend? Even Laugh-Tail being Laugh-Tail was a huge reveal for most of us. Names that seem like total gibberish, like Zunisha's race, Naitami and Norida elephants, are just Dari no e mitai na zo. The elephants like Dali's paintings. The Musketedomo Goyu birds are just Goyu bird Musketedomo, which roughly translates to, there is a bird called Goa. There is a well-known bird found in real-world Goa called the Brahmini kite, or red-backed sea eagle. Why is this relevant? Because the Brahmini kite is widely accepted as the modern depiction of the mythical Garuda. So we have a real-world connection between the Garuda and the Musketedomo Goryu birds, who have Goa in their name. But even in One Piece's Goa Kingdom, where Luffy was born, we notice that the symbol is also a sun, or a lemon, with 3 feathers coming out of it. So, a symbol with a sun and feathers, a sunbird. Then we have the deity Garuda, who was an eagle-esque figure considered to be the king of birds, and a sunbird. It might be noteworthy that there's also the 3-legged crow in Japanese mythology called the Yatagarasu, which translates to 8-span crow, who was said to be the incarnation of the sun. Fascinating, because if Oda took inspiration from the Yatagarasu also, Torino Island's other name, Treasure Island, could make sense, because there's the old wives' tale about crows collecting shiny things. As I mentioned earlier, the Garuda is a king of the birds, so fitting too that the island of the Musketedomo Goryu birds is a kingdom, as in Torino Kingdom. I mean, did no one else find it strange that we have a location titled a kingdom, yet there was no mention of an actual king? And for those of you saying, well, the humans inhabiting the island could have had a king, sure, that's definitely a possibility, but remember, Torino Kingdom literally translates to the kingdom of birds. So who we're looking for is a king of the birds, which might I remind you was the epithet of the Garuda. As a side note, it's fascinating that there was no king of the Torino Kingdom, but that was only before Chopper arrived on the island. In a way, Chopper ended up becoming a leader and a king-like figure to both the people and the birds of the island. I mentioned in my last theory video that Chopper may eventually gain a final form where he will be able to fly because his character is based on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. If Chopper is a parallel to Joyboy's bird Pokemon, it would be fitting that the pet of the Straw Hats ends up visiting the home of Joyboy's pet and becomes its new king. Well then, will Joyboy's bird Pokemon just be the king of the Musketedomo Goryu birds? I gotta say, that's pretty basic. I think that there's one extra element we're still missing. I think that the bird will be technologically enhanced. Perhaps part cyborg, tech advanced armor, or something else that allows them to use fire abilities. We've had clues of this scattered throughout the series, but it's just a matter of piecing it together. The human inhabitants of the Torino Kingdom at first seemed like primitive cavemen, but turned out to have advanced firearms and advanced medical books. Remember the giant bird in Skypiea, Fusa, and his rider Shura? Well, Fusa was a Sanjocho, meaning 3-length bird, who was able to breathe fire due to a flame dial being implemented in him. Although old Marcus here wasn't the warrior god of science and instead of environment, he was in fact symbolized by the planet of Mars, which is Kase in Japanese meaning fire planet. We also have the Goa Kingdom with its ties to the Garuda with its residents dressed in steampunk attire. Even the Revolutionary Army is steampunk, which makes sense since both Dragon and Savo are the former residents. Steampunk and steam-powered machinery of course is another form of technology popular in the world of One Piece, as demonstrated by the likes of Limburg and the sea trains. So fire, bird and technology, we have a connection between them. This is true for the Mother Frame / Flame, a flying piece of technology capable of raining pure destruction. It is also true for Judge the Garuda and his child Sanji, who is also of the fire element and are royals of a kingdom of science. Fitting of course, since in Greek mythology Prometheus gave humanity the gift of fire in the form of knowledge, technology and civilization. So it is highly likely then that Joyboy's bird Pokemon was a tech-enhanced king of the Musketedomo Goryu birds. His name? Well, as I mentioned at the start of this section, Rock's Dizabek seems to hint at a connection to the rock, both in name and the vague silhouette. We don't actually have much more to go off of, but the name alone is quite telling. But I suppose that if Rocks does end up being another bird Pokemon, that would make his Jolly Roger with its flame symbolism make a little more sense now, wouldn't it? So, a bird was the founder of the Rock's D family, and Oda has already told us what his given name will be. These birds, the Musketedomo Goryu birds, Goryu bird Musketedomo. There is a bird called Goa. His name will be Rox D Goa. If you have been shouting at the screen the whole time going, what about Zunisha? I agree that Zunisha was indeed an elephant companion of Joyboy, though my headcanon is that he was actually an ancient giant. And look, at the end of the day, I do think that there were likely more companions to Joyboy with animal-like qualities, but like with the monster trio, I think that Joyboy and the dumb trio were also a unit. Whether the rest of his companions had animal characteristics is neither here or there. But anyway, did you know that the bird, the dog and the monkey also connect to the sun? The Monkey King is Sun Wukong. Sun is in the name. Cerberus the Gatekeeper was a three-headed dog, or rather, sun-headed dog, and the rock has the epithet of Sunbird. All three of these legendary Pokemon have made numerous appearances in the story already. As the world of One Piece is cyclic in nature, history is bound to repeat itself, both in the past and in the future, to the point where it may become impossible to determine where the story even began and where it will end. After all, the last island that the log post will lead you to is the Lodestar Island, or rather in Japanese, Lodestar To, To meaning island. So, Lodestar To, Lodestar To, Lodestar To, road start. The final island is where the road will start, the end of the story meeting up with its beginning. So we will see them again in the future, in a future flashback of the Void Sentry, Joyboy and his 3 legendary Pokemon. But you know the drill. Like, subscribe and comment below with your own examples of the dumb trio and tell me what your favourite factoid from the video was. It takes me literal months to finish these videos and it really does help me out. And while you're at it, give Tainted Mars, Star Knight and Alex, Disnus the Dwarf and the lovely folks at the TLA a follow as well. These goats are truly legendary and deserve all the love. You will not regret going balls deep into them. Seriously, the content is absolute fire red. Check it out! Kusoland signing off. Peace out.